The meeting will now come to order. If you would, please join Vice Chairman Langley and Chairman for the pledge of, for the invocation, and Commissioner Booth for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
Let us pray.
Just a bit of housekeeping. If you have a cell phone, we're reminding you to please either turn it off or put it into silence mode. The next item on the agenda is conflict of interest. Or is there any commissioner who wishes to disclose any matter that is coming before the board tonight? Hearing none, we'll move forward. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Motion to approve.
The second.
Second.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Got it. First item on the agenda tonight is public hearing. I need a motion to go into public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your right hand. Martin, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners. This public hearing is to receive comments on a request from the town of Aurora to borrow $450,000 from the county to purchase land inside the town limits to create an industrial park. Grants in the amounts of $200,000 and $750,000 have been secured from Golden Leaf and the NC Department of Commerce to build the necessary park infrastructure to develop the land. The loan is contingent upon $337,500 worth of developed land being under contract to be sold to businesses that will construct facilities in the park. The public benefits derived from this loan for the town of Aurora and Beaufort County are an increase in the tax base and the creation of new jobs. Are there any public comments?
We'll now open to the public. Anyone would like to speak, please come forward.
Motion to close the public hearing. Motion to close the public hearing.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're ready to move along. Next item is items for presentation from our Chief Finance Officer, Anita Radcliffe. But before she comes up, Commissioner Rebholz had something he wanted to say.
I asked Anita to put this together and present it to the board because I was struck by the fact that we weren't doing this. And I've been on several boards, and every board I've been on, there's a financial report monthly. And in keeping with Stan's comment about the responsibilities of board members being vigilant oversight and wise budgeting, it just seemed to me that this was totally inadequate in terms of performing our duties. So for that, I've asked Anita to do this monthly going forward. So that's the reason it's here.
Thank you. Okay, Anita, thank you.
I too have a question. How do I make my seat go back up? I'm having a time here.
There's a lever on the side.
There's a lever?
Yes.
Well, it's not working for my big old butt.
You have to lift your weight up as you pull.
You do? Maybe not this one. I broke it.
Go put it on the back of my truck.
Okay.
Try it again.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, there we go.
You
Good.
just got to pull it up.
Excellent. Did I go back down? I'm really not that heavy, guys. I don't even look heavy.
Anita? We're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening to you all. And Mr. Rebholz, thank you for the opportunity to give this presentation. I'm happy to do it each month if that's what you'd like for me to do. So tonight, I'm giving what I would consider to be a mid-year review of the county finances because we are now a little more than 7 months into the fiscal year, and actually we've got 8 months in, but with us doing the necessary balancing and reconciliations that we have to do, I'm comfortable tonight with presenting you with information through January 31st, which is 7 months into our fiscal year. I'd like to start tonight with the general fund because obviously this is the county's largest fund. It has a $59.9 million annual budget. And that $59 million in program expenditures are supported by these various revenues that I have listed here in this pie chart that you see. And as you can see, the county really gets its main source of revenue from 3 areas. They are the property taxes, which come in at about 61% of our total revenue. Sales tax makes up about 15.8%. as well as restricted intergovernmental revenues are at about 15.8%. And those restricted intergovernmental revenues, they represent grants and programs that are paid for at DSS and the Health Department. So these 3 categories align for property taxes, sales tax, and the restricted intergovernmental make up 92% of the county's general fund revenue. So as we delve a little bit deeper into property taxes, since that is our largest revenue, what we see is when we compare our collections at January 31st, 2020 to 1 year ago, you can see that our collection rate is quite a bit better than it was at this time last year. Currently, we're at 91.8% collected on our taxes compared to 90.1% at the same time last year. I'm expecting, projecting out property taxes throughout the end of the year that we will come in approximately $350,000 over what we budgeted in the current year for property taxes. Moving on to our next largest revenue, this is still property taxes. What I wanted to show you here is a 5-year look at our property tax collections. And you can see that they've been pretty stagnant, and we've only experienced about, on average, 1% growth in our property taxes in the last 8 years. When we went through that reval in 2018 and were able to look at all of the previous 8 years' history on our property tax values and collections, that's what we noticed. Our average growth over that 8-year period was 0.9%. So just at 1% growth. And if you look at that 2019 number, that looks higher, obviously, than all the rest, but that is the year that we had a rate adjustment. So any additional collections in that year is more attributed to the adjustment in the rate rather than any growth in the tax base. So moving on now to sales tax, which is the second largest revenue for the county. For the first 6 months of this current fiscal year, we're at $4,986,392 compared to $4.8 million at the very same time last year. So you can see we're up approximately $170,000 or 3.5% on our sales tax collections so far this year compared to last year. This schedule shows more detail on the sales tax distributions that we've received so far from the state for the first 6 months of the year. And as I just mentioned, for the first 6 months, we've collected the number in blue there highlighted at the bottom. It's $4,986,000. And so if we assume that we're going to continue to collect for the last 6 months of the year as we've collected in the first 6 months of the year, then we can annualize that number and estimate that our total collections for sales tax for the current fiscal year should be somewhere around $9.972 million. And we have budgeted for this year $9.486 million, so we are anticipating a nice surplus in sales tax of about $485,000 this year. And that's assuming that these sales tax numbers hold. I mean, I know there's some information in the media about the coronavirus and the impact that that might have, depending on how bad that virus may get. You know, worst case scenario, people stay in their homes, they don't get out, they don't spend money. That certainly would have an impact, a negative impact on our sales tax numbers. This is probably the most fascinating slide that I have in my whole presentation. So I got a little carried away yesterday while I was putting my presentation together. I thought, you know, I'm looking at sales tax. I really want to go back and look at sales tax pre-Great Recession, the 2008-2009 period, and just see how it's grown since then. You know, how long did it take us to get back to those numbers? And guess what? We're not back yet. And that's shocking to me. I didn't know that until I put this together yesterday night. So pre-Great Recession, we were at $10.5 million annually on our sales tax collections, and I'm estimating for this year we're going to end up at $9.9 million. So we've still got another, what, $500 and almost $600,000 to get us back to where we were at. I think that's amazing. I couldn't believe that we weren't already there. So this brings 2 points to my mind, I guess. From a positive perspective, Brian and I have been talking about through the budgeting process for the last couple years, you know, at some point our sales tax probably is going to plateau. But when I look at this, it gives me hope that maybe it won't plateau. Not yet. Not until we get back at least to the 10.5 million. Certainly there's got to be room for growth to get us back to the 2008 sales tax number. So that's a positive. That's a good thing. I guess the scary thing about it, or the negative thing about it, is if we do have a reset in the economy, if we do have a slight recession, how greatly will our sales tax be affected? We certainly don't expect to have a great recession again, we hope. We hope all those controls have been put in place that need to be put in place. But we certainly are going to have some sort of a reset in the economy. It can't continue to grow forever. If you look back to the 2008, between 2008-9 down to 2012 when it hit a low, that's 38% decrease in our sales tax. That's $4 million. I mean, and imagine if we had to make up that kind of money. So that just gives me another reason why I feel like it's important for us. We talk about needing a healthy fund balance, and we do have a healthy fund balance. This is another good reason to have a healthy fund balance, because you can ride out storms like this if you have a healthy fund balance and wait for the economy to turn around. The other thing I wanted to mention are our general fund interest earnings. Our cash balance at January 31st, 2020 for the general fund was the $33,669,852. And of course, that's up about $700,000 from the same time last year. I just want to caution you, this is not all spendable, unassigned fund balance. There are some restrictions on portions of this money for programs, for grants that we've received. So our current fund balance at June 30th was about 27.5%. Moving down to the general fund interest earnings for the last 5 years, you can see in 2016 we only earned $20,369. And then fast forward 4 years later to 2019, which is our last audit that was just presented, and we had $523,246 in interest earnings. And you know, that's the reason for that, there are a couple of factors. First of all, market rates have increased, interest rates have increased. And the other thing is we did issue that banking RFP that drastically reduced our service fees. So there was a great savings there that we were able to realize that allowed us to get to the $523,000 in interest earnings in 2019. Now for 2020, I don't believe we'll hit the $523,000. I'm projecting $400,000 as our interest income for the current fiscal year. And the main reason for that is because the Federal Reserve, as you know, just did a large, half a point, which is pretty large, rate cut, I guess back in January or maybe December. Just did that. And then also, while I was at my conference last week, we had the Spring Finance Officers Conference in Durham, the chief economist from Wells Fargo gave a very good update on the economy. And he said that they anticipate that there will be another cut in April and in June by the Federal Reserve. So really great if you need to borrow money, if you need to refinance a house. But if you're like the county and you want to earn interest on your idle cash, not so good. So we're going to really see our interest earnings fall off next year. This got really small, so that's why I gave you a handout. This is actually the expenditure side of the general fund. And what I wanted to show you here is for every department, you got every department listed here for the general fund. It shows their original appropriation that they got as of July 1. It shows any adjustments to their budget to give them a revised budget. It shows them what they have spent in the first 7 months of the year. So this is their July 1st through January 31st spending in that fourth column, year-to-date expended. It shows them any outstanding obligations, encumbrances, purchase orders, which gives you an available balance that they had left to spend for the remainder of the year. And so if you figure we're 7 months into the year, 7/12 is 58.3%. So what I do is I go through and I look at any department to gauge if they're in that range where they need to be at 58% spending or if they're well above it. And if they're well above it, I like to investigate and find out why that is. And so for those few departments that are over, I've provided you with an explanation of why that is. And so an example of that would be, if you go down to the third highlighted one, we have our non-departmental cost center. That's where we pay for our very large annual insurance invoice to the association. And we pay that the first couple of days of July. So that's why that department is going to look like it's spent all of its money and has none left. Well, there's a good reason. We've already paid all the invoices. So going through and analyzing this and looking at all this, I really don't have any concerns at this point in time that we're going to have any department in the general fund that will overspend their appropriated funds.
I have a question on that sheet.
Yes, sir.
For the jail, not included in that is that $1.5 million in jail repairs.
That's right. That is later in my presentation.
Okay, that's an off-budget item.
It's a capital project fund, and we're going to talk about that in detail in about 5 minutes. I wanted to move next to the water fund. So we have done an incredible amount of work in the water fund the last couple of years to stabilize this fund and to get it on solid footing. If you'll think back to 2008, that's the year that we took the 7 water districts, we consolidated them into one operating system under that interlocal operating agreement. And as a part of all that consolidation, we had that outside consultant do the rate study for us. Because what we had was we had the 7 districts and we had 7 different water rates that our customers were paying depending on which district they lived in. So as part of all that process, and as part of that rate study, they looked at that and they figured out a way to move us to one uniform rate across all 7 districts in a 5-year period. And so next year when we're starting on the budget next week, next year will be year 3 of that plan. The other thing that we did was the Public Works Director completed a 10-year capital improvement plan, and we were able to have the consultant factor those funds into that rate study as well. And then the other major project that we've had recently is we've done an overhaul of our metering system where we replaced old antiquated manual read meters, that's a tongue twister, with smart meters. And so we told you there would be a good return on investment on this project. You believed us. You allowed us to move forward. Well, some of you believed us. You allowed us to move forward with the project, and I'm here to tell you tonight, look at the numbers. Look at there at the bottom at the revenue and expenditures. So for revenue, our revenue's gone up. When you look at January 31st of this fiscal year compared to last, our expenditures have gone down. And this is a direct effect of this AMI project. I'm confident that it is. I want to call your attention to the very top of this slide just to show you that the cash and investment balances at January 31st, 2020, the water fund had $9.6 million in the bank. This time last year it was $8.7 million. Don't get too excited about that. Everybody knows that we have those huge limited obligation bonds that we pay every year. They are due June 1st, and that bond payment's going to be a little over $2 million. So it's not unnormal for us to accumulate funds all through the year, and in June we pay out that $2 million, which brings our cash balance down. Currently in the water fund, we have 9 capital projects going on. They're for things like emergency generators. We have the chlorine conversion project, booster pumps being installed, and then of course the water treatment plant expansion on the south side. All these projects total $10.6 million, and these are in capital project funds kind of outside of the water fund. These are being paid for by grants and zero interest loans from the Department of Environmental Quality and Golden Leaf. So that was the good news. So now we move into more of some of our challenging areas, and the first one I want to talk to you about is solid waste. So pre-2017, before the manager and I came, solid waste was actually a department within the general fund. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with showing it that way. It's certainly not illegal, but the problem with that is it makes it very difficult to identify the true cost of the solid waste operations because they're being folded up with all the other general fund activities. So what we did is we said, let's break out solid waste from the general fund, and once we did that, we were able to identify that it was actually a $1 million subsidy in solid waste operations that was being paid by the general fund tax dollars. And here's a picture of that. This came straight out of the fiscal year 2017 budget that Brian and I put together. And you can see that the solid waste fees at the time, the rate was $90 per resident. It was generating a little less than $2 million a year in revenue. The expenses were a little over $3 million. So you can see clearly there was about $1 million subsidy, plus or minus, being paid for those solid waste operations. Our solution, of course, was to turn the solid waste operations into an enterprise fund and make it self-supporting as it should have been all along. So to cover the annual expenses of collecting all that garbage at the convenience sites, hauling it, transferring it, disposing of it, all of that required a higher rate by the residents. We actually calculated the rate to be $145 per residential parcel that needed to be paid to raise $3 million in revenue to cover the $3 million in expenses. Now, unfortunately, that left very little to zero revenue to build any type of fund balance in that new fund, because that was a brand new enterprise fund. It started with zero fund balance, so it didn't really leave any money for that. And then it also didn't provide any funds to do any type of maintenance on the convenience sites, which, you know, they were all pretty much in desperate need of repair. So if we look at the solid waste cash and investment balances at June 30th last year, minus a payment that we had to make to the contractor that does that work for us, we had a cash balance last year at June 30th of $21,355. And this is not on the slide, but you might also remember we had to do a transfer from the general fund to the solid waste fund in the amount of $160,000 to cover all the additional solid waste and debris that were collected at the convenience sites because of Hurricane Florence. So I think if you can see this, this tells the story for solid waste. Here's the problem. Tonnage keeps going up every year. People keep consuming and throwing away. We keep buying more and more online, which means extra packaging. You know, you got the original box that it would have been in on the shelf, plus it's gotten in a bigger cardboard box with bubble wrap and this, that, and the other. So we've got more waste, but when you look at what we're billing for the revenue side, look down at the bottom. When you look at 2018 to 2019, we only picked up 65 additional accounts to bill. That generates $10,000. That's not enough. That's not sustainable. Now, if you look over to the left and you say, well, from 16 to 17, you added 500. But that was the year that we picked up those nonprofits. So you got to kind of set that aside. That's an anomaly, okay? But the bottom line is, we're not seeing the growth, and we all know we're not having growth in our community. So we're not able to, it's just not sustainable. The revenue's not coming in to keep up with the trash that continues to go up. So we're having to really rethink the way we manage our garbage, our solid waste. And fortunately, this committee or this board has appointed a solid waste committee that is looking at these issues, and I'm sure and feel confident that they'll be coming up with solutions for us. So I saved the best for last. The jail door repair project, this is a separate project from the general fund. It is a capital project that we established back in June of 2019. And at the time when this was put together, the best information that we had, I'm here to tell you the best information that I had, was that the project was anticipated to begin in July of 2019 and be completed 6 months later, sometime in January 2020. So based on that information, this is the capital project numbers that I put together. We put in $25,000 for permit preparation. The bid had come in for the actual capital repairs for the doors at $798,000. Safekeeping I calculated to be $630,000, and you can see down at the bottom how I came up with that number. I based it on 70 inmates per day at $50 per day for 6 months, which is 180 days. And then we threw in a little bit of contingency there for the repair piece. So right now we have a total project of $1,535,300. Now, based on the best information that I have tonight, the project is expected to begin the first part of April 2020, so in the next few weeks. still with a completion date of June 30th, 2020. So having said that, I am calculating an additional appropriation in the amount of $462,610 will be needed for safekeeping to get us through the end of the completion of this project. 462,210. 15353. We're going to be at $2 million. So that is pretty much what I had for you this evening as a financial presentation. I hope it met your expectations on what you were expecting. If not, I'm happy to meet with you and let me know what you're kind of expecting to see if you want something different moving forward.
Any questions? Mr. Rebels.
Well, first, thank you very much for the presentation. I think it assures the community that we know we've got people on staff that know what they're doing and have got this information at their hands. Yeah, we got issues to work with and work on, and we've got to move forward on those. But I think you've done a marvelous job of correcting some of the things that lingered in the past.
And I think this board is aware of the areas of concern. For me, it's solid waste and it's the jail. And we have committees for both of those areas that are trying to come up with solutions for us. But you will see on the agenda under decision later tonight, there is a budget amendment where we are requesting additional funds for safekeeping.
Commissioner Waters.
I'm assuming on the amendment and the number you're using up there, that's because I disputed during our two-day planning session. I thought it was too much, but I agree with the way you come up with it. On this sheet here, the next one you do,
Yes, sir.
will you put lines going, put it in a grid?
Yes, I'll add
If you got progressive lens, you kind of start here and you work your way down.
I'll do that. Happy to.
But it's very good, very informative.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Anyone else? Great job. Thank you.
Very much.
We're down to public comments. Mr. Swain.
Good evening, gentlemen. I think we can do something really big that'll help everybody in the town if y'all go along with me on it. And it doesn't cost anything. I noticed in my life when I was a kid, my grandma used to take me to the river, and there was crabs would pinch your toes, and eels, and minnows, and it was creepy when you were a little kid. And then later on, when you got in the river, it was gone. All the seaweed was gone. And what killed it was the weed killer from the farmers leaks in there. I'm pro-farmer, but some of the chemicals, they run off into the river and kill the seaweed, and that's why we don't have any anymore. And I've lived in the river out there for years on a houseboat, and I fished under the trestle. And the trestle, if you've ever been under it in a john boat when the train goes over, it's absolutely terrifying. That thing was rotten 30 years ago. I was under it one day and it was all shaking. And I thought maybe this was a bad idea, you know, but that's been 30 years ago. It was rotten then. And the train, that trestle, hauls fertilizer across it. And the trestle's rotten. And if it falls in the river, it's going to wipe the river out. And it doesn't belong to the DOT. It doesn't belong to the taxpayers. It belongs to the railroad. So that's their baby. It wouldn't cost us a nickel. It wouldn't cost the taxpayers anything to have something really big done here in Beaufort County. And I think it'd be easier for the railroad. I don't know if they've been notified about it, but they might want to be notified about it. And it would be easier to get the train out of the river or build a new trestle while the old trestle's still there. They can build a new trestle beside of it. And we will be in trouble if the train rolls in there. And because that's will contaminate our well water. It will get into county well water. And I think if we approach the railroad nicely, they might do it for us. And they got their own police department and all. This is a big organization. I would recommend maybe sending the county engineer to go talk to them, ask them real nice, and tell them about the trestle and what's going to happen to us. And maybe they'll do it for us if you approach them nice. I would put my best foot forward on it when I went to approach them with it. And that's something that's been bothering me a long time. It really does need to be looked at. When the tide's out, it's rotting under the water. It looks good in a boat. I saw a picture of it the other day with a sailboat laying over on the side. The posts are white at the bottom. You can see in a photograph they're deteriorated. So I just want to run that by you guys and see if y'all can't get somebody to call the railroad. And it won't cost the taxpayers a nickel. It'll keep our wells from getting contaminated. And
thank you, Mr. Swain. We're now down to items for consent. I need a motion to approve consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
All in favor, please raise your right hand. 5-2. Okay, all those opposed? 5-2 again. Okay. Okay, we're down to items for decision. Martin.
Good evening again, Commissioners. You know Mr. Cliff Williams, who's the Mayor of Aurora. Come to you about the project that we just talked about in the public hearing, the Aurora Industrial Park. It's been making slow and steady progress, I think, for probably about 5 years now. We've been working on it very hard, and we've been working with organizations such as Golden Leaf, the North Carolina Department of Commerce Industrial Development Fund, the East Group, county and town lawyers, and most importantly, the potential clients for the park. Once the legal documents, which you have before you tonight, are approved, the Golden Leaf will release grant funds for the engineering work to be completed by the East Group. Once the engineering work is done, the town of Aurora currently expects to execute letters of intent from 3 companies that are interested in acquiring between 12 and 16 acres, representing about $150,000 worth of developed land purchases, which gets us towards the goal of having 75%. Profile of those companies are that one firm is considering acquiring 10 acres on the east side of the park and extending it all the way to the South Creek for their operation. Another is strongly considering up to 3 acres to locate a regional office at the park with initial employment of about 30 people and eventually 40. And the third needs 2 or 3 acres to improve their operations for trucks and other heavy-duty equipment repair and maintenance. And there are several other companies that have expressed strong interest in establishing facilities in the park, and obviously with your vote that will really strongly help us to move forward with those discussions. In your package you have 3 documents prepared by the town and county attorneys to formalize the loan agreement. The one is the intergovernment loan financing agreement for $450,000, and that is, as I said, contingent on getting $337,500 or 75% of that of the park under contract, the developed park under contract. This would leave the county's exposure at only $112,500, which, as I said, the improvements to the land of $200,000 and $750,000 would very much offset that. There's a 59-month promissory note without an interest rate filled in, which I assume you would fill in tonight, but the county has lent itself money recently at about 1.67%, although which is the interest that we earn, I believe, on the deposits we have at the bank, although that might be going down as interest rates fall over the next few months. There's a legal description of the Aurora Industrial Park and the map, and then the deed of trust on the real property. What we have been told and what we've been working on over the past 5 years is a very unique public-private partnership model, and is going to be helping in the redevelopment of rural eastern North Carolina. And I think that's a very important part to say, because a lot of the county that's closer to Greenville and a more urban area is doing reasonably well. And I think some of the figures that Anita shows are that, that part of the Beaufort County economy has recovered. I think where the county is hurting is the east side. And that really hasn't recovered since the Great Recession, and I think that needs to happen. So the staff recommends that Beaufort County Board of Commissioners approve the $450,000 intergovernmental loan agreement and other documents with the town of Aurora to assist in the creation of the Aurora Industrial Park, to curb the economic decline of the town and southeastern Beaufort County by participating in a sustainable economic recovery project. And that is the presentation.
Question? Mr. Richardson.
Getting the $337,000 commitment, what form is that commitment going to be in?
That will be basically in a commitment to purchase. It will be, I don't want to say pre-sale because technically we can't sell what's not ours, but there will be contracts to purchase the land.
You signed contracts?
Yes.
Okay. Well, one thing that I just noticed in this is a balloon payment at the end of 59 months. And if the town completes those $337,500 of offer to purchase, why not just give that money to the county as partial repayment on our loan? I don't particularly like balloon payments.
Mm-hmm. I think the dilemma in Aurora, and that's a possibility, I think, the dilemma in Aurora is the town is so small, and that one of the issues that we've been trying to get all this arranged for is basically cash flow. Without funds, it is hard to move forward. So they don't have a fund balance. They don't have money. So to give them some liquidity over those 5 years would be useful, just to make everything work smoothly.
Well, if I had known this, I wouldn't be voting for this, because the county shouldn't be providing fund balance for the town of Aurora. I mean, if they don't, you just told me they don't have a fund balance. That's not a good thing. So maybe the mayor can clear that up a little bit.
The town does have a fund balance, and financially the town is in good shape for the fact, even with the fact that we have been declining in population. But that won't continue if we don't do something like this to try to reverse the trend that the town is going in.
Do you know what % of your annual budget the fund balance is?
Well, we just had our audit presented by Larry Carpenter, the town auditor. I don't know what the exact figure is, but we are in good standing, better standing than we have been in several years.
Well, that doesn't mean very much, simply because the state law just says 8%. 8% is nothing. That's 1 month's operations. So, if you got a 15% fund balance or a 20% fund balance or what?
No, I don't.
I wish if I'd have known you were going to ask that question, I would have certainly brought that with us.
We'll be happy to provide that information.
Well, is it necessary that you have this $337,000 to provide liquidity?
Oh, this project won't go forward without it. It's dead.
In other words, you're going to use the $337,000 plus the $450,000 to fund the project.
We're going to use the $450,000 to purchase the land. After we sell the $337,000, then the county will give us the $450,000. We will take that $337,000 as soon as we close on the project and give that back to Beaufort County.
I apologize for missing.
Okay, you're going to give us back the $337,000 as payment on the loan when you get the money from the people you're selling the property to. Okay, well, that was the question I was asking. I feel a whole lot better.
Great.
Sorry I misspoke.
Yeah, we're not trying to do
Commissioner Waters
and owe any money. We will be out of this completely debt-free when it's done.
I took a look yesterday afternoon at the tax value of this property and played around with the numbers a little bit, and I don't feel good about us doing a $450,000 loan on this property unless it's appraised by the county.
That's why we're pre-selling the property, so you will get $337,500.
I still,
So
I mean,
there won't be
because
any loan until
we're going to advance, we're not going to advance the $450 until you sell it?
until 75% of it is sold, yes.
Yeah, but if you read the documents, I mean, a purchase order, until they get bank financing, they can pull out.
The concept is that they would not be able to pull out. That would be in the contract.
Well, here again,
But there wouldn't be any money spent.
if we're going to be in the banking business, the county's getting in the banking business with citizens' money, we should have the property appraised.
It's not really the banking business, it's the development business, economic development, and we've just talked about the county isn't growing. We've got to do something to make the county grow, and it's not a bank deal. You aren't a bank. If this was bankable, we would go to a bank, but it's not. So we're coming to you to try and stimulate something in eastern Beaufort County to create jobs, create investment, and to try and save the town of Aurora. So
The tax revenue off of this is for Beaufort County and Aurora, based on our conservative estimates, is going to be about $22,500 a year.
yeah,
For Aurora and Beaufort County.
And that's 50% of the current tax base of the town. So you basically, have 150% of the tax base.
Well, we just sold 5 acres in the industrial park. And the industrial park is already developed, and that's over $10,000 an acre. I mean, this property, playing around with the numbers, $450,000 is based on $15,000 an acre. And Aurora.
Right. Proximity to the largest taxpayer in the county and Duke Energy's largest customer. It's the town of Aurora has been, as you say, going downhill. And this, you can't really say this property is in the town. It's next to these companies are not coming because it's Aurora. They're coming because of it being next to the largest taxpayer in Beaufort County. And, part of that also is trying to support that company.
Frankly, the contractors right now are spending that kind of money for a lot, not an acre, a lot with no running water and no toilets, just for the privilege of servicing our biggest taxpayer. What we're offering them is an acre of land with water, sewer, hopefully fiber optics, but at least internet. And then they own the property. In the other case, they don't even own the land. So let's say that their contract expires, or they move on to someplace else. At least they've got something, or you've got something that another contractor can come in and they can either purchase it or lease it from the existing contractor that has the property right now. So as far as Aurora goes and Beaufort County goes, this is win-win, because you've always got contractors that are going to be coming back in. There's always contractors that have to do that type of work.
What are the chances you think that that the county will end up with any of this property?
I don't think there's any chance of it.
Okay.
I wouldn't even bring it to the town of Aurora or the county if I thought that was the case. I mean, this is, when has the county ever been offered a deal like this?
I've not seen it.
You don't think you have?
I've not seen it. All right. Just so we're transparent on this, if we take it as collateral, I guess really with what we're saying is, why do we even need to take a deed of trust on it? I can assure you that what are we going to do with it if we have to take it back? That's why you take a deed of trust. I mean, if we're doing it, then I think that's immaterial. Now, if you go to one of the things that we did over at Bath for the group over there that was tied to the state coming in and leasing the building for 10 years, we saw fit in that project, which was a little over $1 million, the county put in $50,000. and a grant. So I'd like to see us change, and if we're going to do it, that we put in up to $50,000 and a grant. And the other 400, call it whatever you want to. But I think it's really immaterial unless the attorney says we just have to take a deed of trust. People do loans all the time unsecured.
Well, I don't know about you, but if you try to get an unsecured loan, the interest rates of those are off the chart.
Well, I don't. Here again, I think whatever.
I don't even think I want to get involved in an unsecured debt with as far as the loan goes.
Ron, can we do that? Or?
Can we ask David if he's reviewed these documents, what situation he thinks we're in?
Excuse me. It was my feeling that originally I didn't foresee a deed of trust being involved, just an unsecured promissory note. Conceptually, that's what I was thinking. The other attorney that I was working with, who's no longer working on this for whatever reason, thought that there should be a deed of trust involved. So therefore, in our drafting, we went in that direction. I don't know of anything that mandates that we have a deed of trust. But if you got a promissory note, I'm trying to think of, I have drawn some unsecured notes in my career, but the vast majority are secured by a deed of trust. And it's just automatic to my thinking, ultimately.
Well, I can remember when promissory notes disappeared, and that's when people stopped paying the banks. I walked in the bank plenty of times and signed a promissory note and walked out with the money. But you can't do that anymore because a lot of people found out they could go to the money machine, get the money, and they really didn't have to pay them back because nothing was secured. But if you're going to roll back the money that you get from the sale of the lots to the county, and you're not going to do the deal until you get those secured, then our risk is not $450,000.
Yes, sir.
Our risk is about $112,000. So that was the reason I was asking those questions, was to see what our risk is. And I think if you're going to do the deal that way, I don't have a problem supporting it. I think we need the promissory note because business is business.
Correct. And we're not trying to do anything that's not above board here. But we are trying to get everything pre-sold before we move forward, and depending on what you do tonight depends on whether or not we get the grants and everything to move forward. So,
Brian, you had a comment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Just a little bit of discussion about how when we first put this together and we were having discussions with the town of Aurora on it, the idea was to limit the county's exposure. They were understanding of that. They agreed to that. They thought that was a good idea as well. So the 75% of the total has to be committed and on paper and ready to go, and essentially it's a simultaneous closing. The funds flow and then the funds flow back to us. So your exposure over 59 months is essentially the 112,500. And then in your promissory note, if you look on page 183 at the last paragraph in that promissory note, it reads that the maker agrees to use all proceeds from the sale of the parcels comprising the real property to pay down the principal and interest accrued here within. So essentially, as they sell additional property, we will get those funds back. And it's only over a 59-month period. The reason it's 59 months is once you go to 60 months, then you got to get involved with the LGC.
Commissioner Repos?
I make a motion that we approve the request for the Aurora loan as has been defined up till now.
Second.
Is a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to amend that.
Okay.
I'd like to amend it, reduce the loan to $400,000 and provide a grant of $50,000.
Is there a second to the amendment?
I mean, I'm real disappointed. This is economic development 101. Golden Leaf is coming in here and putting a total of how much money?
200,000 from Golden Leaf and 750,000 from the
Department of Commerce.
So 950,000.
And the local government cannot even put up any money to provide economic development in the Aurora area. Very disappointing.
Mr. Chairman, I would like for this board to release me from the obligation to vote. I do business with Aurora, so I think it would be better. I think I do have a conflict of interest.
Any other discussion?
Do I get a motion on that? Motion?
I'll
make the motion.
I'll second that.
One of my concerns, I went, okay. All those in favor of releasing, raise your right hand. All those opposed, 7-0. I went back and, one of my concerns was pull some comps. And I have some questions about how much of this land is in wetlands area. And if we had a flood, these people being exposed to putting water in South Creek, the South River. So that's the general location. If I was going to put a bunch of equipment, hydraulic fluid, diesel fuel, all this other stuff in that particular area, I would have concerns.
It's probably some of the highest land in Aurora. It's as high as my house is, and it didn't flood.
Okay.
But there is some low areas in there, and we've taken that into consideration. So technically we weren't even figuring in the 51 acres. We were only figuring in something like 42 acres that was sellable land, and so we based the whole idea based on selling about 42 acres. However, we do have one contractor that still wants to buy it all, but they're in the land business, land clearing business. So if they want to buy it, then it solves another problem that we have.
And like I say, I think some of the verbiage in here scared me a little bit when I first read it. One firm is considering, another firm is strongly considering. I wish there was a little more commitment, which made me feel better.
I'll be honest with you, Jerry. We can't even give them a map right now, because we owe the engineering firm about $39,000.
Okay.
Golden Leaf is willing to, or considering, going ahead and taking that $39,000 out of the money that they were going to commit to us to go ahead and pay for engineering, what we owe the engineering firm, so that we can go ahead and give these customers, or hopefully customers, a map, because they want to know exactly what it is they're going to purchase, and we haven't been able to give them that. So we're kind of stalled right now for that very reason.
Commissioner Booth.
The thing, Mayor, isn't anything going to happen? The county will not write a check until you come up with $337,000. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
And then you got 59 months to pay
sell
the county,
the rest of it.
Sell the rest of it and pay the county their money back. So if the deal fall flat tomorrow or fall flat next week, the county's not out of a dime.
Not out of anything.
Thank you.
Would you read your motion again, Commissioner Repple?
I motion that the board approve the Aurora loan request for the $450,000 with the deed of, what is
trust?
The deed of trust.
You said the presentations that's already been made.
Yes.
Representations that have been made. And I seconded that.
Brian?
And the board can certainly take this as a piece of that motion, or you can come back at a second vote to let us know how you want to do either what the interest rate, or if you want to include interest rate on that. Like we've talked about, our cost of money on idle funds is 1.67%.
At that lower rate, we'll spend more money on accountants figuring rates than we will the money, so just forget the interest rate. It's so.
John, do you have another comment?
No. I think we do need to clarify this, though. If we're charging 0, or are we going to charge 1.67?
Well, you made the motion, and you didn't include an
I
interest
know.
rate, so what I was
I
saying
think
was, you could continue and finish this motion, but we would ask you to come back with another motion to define the interest rate.
Why don't you just include it?
Get a minute.
If he'll motion it, I'll second.
I'll amend my motion to include an interest rate of 1.67%
You go second.
Is that for 5 years?
for the term of the contract.
The annual interest rate.
59 months.
15.
You're going to fix that.
The term would be 59 months, yes, sir. We can't go any longer than that, simply because if we do roll over, then we have to go to LGC.
Well, and the rest of this is all written at 59 months.
Yeah. The contract as presented is what my second is. The contract as presented, the only exception is to put the interest in.
Brian, you,
And of course, that means if they pay back the $337,000 right away, there'll be almost zero interest. As soon as it comes over.
Brian, we okay? Okay. Any more discussion?
It would be zero if we gave them $50,000 in a grant, guys. Come on.
Next. Time to vote. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed? That's what you were saying, 6-0. Eddie couldn't vote. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
We'll keep you
And if
updated.
y'all want to consider that 50,000.
See, you know
Don't stay up late at night.
Well, that'll probably be sometime in October, just before the election.
That's right.
Thank you, gentlemen, I appreciate it.
Anita?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did the best I could to try to tee this up for you during my presentation, but the bottom line is to get us through June 30th to do the repairs at the jail, we're going to need an additional $462,210 for safekeeping. If I can do anything to soften the blow, I tried to do that. I was able to identify some additional sales tax and property tax revenue, so it won't have to come out of fund balance. But on page 194, you'll see the budget amendment is there, and that's what we're requesting you approve tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Waters?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we make that amendment.
Is there a second?
I second.
Discussion?
Question. Madam Finance Lady, is any of those inmates that we can stand the bond at a cheaper rate than $460,000? I mean, it seems like to me it's cheaper to stand the bond than it is to keep them in safekeeping. And $50 a day, I can't think of a day that I eat $50 worth of, but I'm just bringing it out there.
Okay.
You're going to take this newly discovered money from sales taxes and use it to fund this, right?
Yes.
Well, I don't mind telling you over and over and over again, I have a problem with our bookkeeping. It's a cover-up system. You've already heard that the $1.5 million is off budget. Even though the sheriff, through his mismanagement, managed to get us into this situation, he's not being punished for it. We took this and we made it into a capital item, and all of a sudden it's not a part of the budget. Guess what? He's not responsible for anything, and that's probably true. And now we come and we're taking newly found revenue, which is supposed to go into the general fund, and we're covering up even more expense to get to the $2 million. I have a real serious problem with these bookkeeping games. They're not fair. They're not fair to the budget. They're not fair to the taxpayers, but they are immensely fair to the sheriff, because it covers up his mismanagement. Now, this should come out of the general fund, out of the fund balance, and the $400 and something thousand, all the tax money should go into that. That's normally the way that we've been running this government. But all of a sudden, we're running a game.
Commissioner Richardson, I'm fine with that. If you would like to appropriate fund balance, in the end, it's all the same thing. I'm fine with you changing that to fund balance appropriated. There's no difference.
Still.
At the end of the day, at June 30th, it's still going to be the same amount of money. and it's all going to be in fund balance.
Well, you guys willing to amend your motion to take the money out of fund balance rather than to take it from the newly discovered money?
Yes, sir. I'll amend that.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Where would the sales tax money go as it comes in? Would that go into fund balance?
Fund balance.
So you're not talking about that.
It's the very same thing,
About
sir.
honest bookkeeping is what you're talking
It
about.
would show on the books that way.
It would.
You guys don't get it.
Brian?
Mr. Chairman, just to be clear, and I know Commissioner Richardson and I have this conversation occasionally at board meetings, but there isn't anything dishonest about the bookkeeping. The bookkeeping is transparent, it's clear. That's why it's being brought to you. That's why you're having this discussion. That's why it's clear. As the finance officer said, it really doesn't matter. If you have new revenues that come in, you can appropriate those new revenues. You have to do that by a budget amendment anyway, which is what you have in front of you. If you don't want to do that, you can take it out of fund balance. And then at the end of the year, when those additional revenues come in, they will roll to fund balance. And when the auditors finish up, it'll all be straight. So there's nothing crooked about the bookkeeping. It is as clear as it can be. And I just want that to be clear for the board, because when comments are made that we're not doing things correctly and we're doing things illegally, it's inappropriate and it's not right. We need to correct that. Thank you.
Commissioner Revels.
Has anybody looked at doing a contract with Cure Cut and Dare? Because their rates are lower than the $50. And I don't know what the capacity is or anything, but they're showing $40 on your chart.
It essentially is the sheriff's office that deals with the inmates, and where they're able to get those folks put in at different times. We really don't have control over that. They're making calls, as I understand, on a daily, sometimes, or a weekly, sometimes a daily basis to try to figure out where they can put inmates. And it's really who's available, who has spots available. So it kind of goes wherever. I think they're trying to minimize it as best they can. I don't think they're going to Durham County just because Durham County's paying the most, because it's not doing us any good. But it is a constant attempt on their part to find open spaces.
Commissioner Langley.
And I say this to the manager, don't let that faze you, because if we felt like you were dishonest, hit the road, Jack.
That's right, out the door.
So don't lose any faith in that.
Just for our staff, I want that to be clear. Thank you.
Commissioner Richardson.
The point that I'm making on this is not dishonesty. You guys invented that word. It is standard bookkeeping, standard operating procedures. And it seems like every time we get a chance, we jump off of the standard operating procedures. And if you're off of standard operating procedures, you can't understand the books. So when I say honest set of books, a clean set of books with standard procedures, revenues go into the general fund always. And if you're going to pull money out of the general fund, you do it with a budget ordinance. That's a standard operating procedure. And we're getting sloppy when we go in any other direction with that.
Commissioner Waters.
This comment is for the population of the jail. On March 2, the population was 63 total. 40 of those were in the Beaufort County Detention Center. We had 23 in safekeeping in various places. Onslow County shared their facility with us, and we had 9 there. Cabarrus County had 5. Craven County had 4, and Dare had 3, and thank goodness Durham didn't have any, because I think that was the highest bill we've ever had, was from Durham County. And then we had 2 that were in safekeeping, one in the central prison, and I guess the other one is the women's facility. If I got that right, NCCIW?
That's women's.
Okay, so one in central prison and one in the women's prison, which would have been there regardless, probably, even if we had...
We don't have the capacity.
If we had the, everything was running. Thank you.
Time to vote. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, 5-2. Motion passes. Brian, you want to talk about child support?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In front of you have the child support contract renewal with Young Williams. They currently do the child support work for the county. This contract ends this fiscal year. You have attached a contract for a 5-year term. That 5-year term includes a 2% annual adjustment increase in the contract. Under this new contract, Young Williams would vacate the county DSS office where they are currently located and establish an office in the city of Washington. As you're aware, DSS needs some additional space, so it's an appropriate time for Young Williams to move out and provide us that space. There is also included in this a $50,000 computer refresh piece. They typically, we've actually done that with them before, and under a 5-year contract, the state essentially says for DSS computers, those will be refreshed every 5 years, so that's why that's in this contract. They anticipate doing that refresh in the third and fourth quarters of 2021, so we would add that additional $50,000 into the budget in fiscal year 21-22. The contract administrator for the county on this project is Commissioner Richardson. He and the county attorney and the county DSS director have also reviewed the contract, and we would recommend your approval.
Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve this 5-year contract with Young Williams for our child support services.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion. All those, you got a question, go ahead.
How are we going to pay for the annual increase of 2%? And how does that get budgeted? We don't have any automatic increase in escalators within the county budget. So how do you approve something? I mean, you're begging for a tax increase. I'm glad you did that.
No tax increase.
Essentially,
how do you pay for it?
half of that cost is paid for by the state of North Carolina, so you're still on the hook for about $25,000. So you essentially look for efficiencies or you look to cut somewhere else.
You're not going to enter into any long-term yearly contracts without a cost escalator that's based on the cost of living index or some index somewhere. 2% is very small based on what could be happening to us. So this is a standard operating procedure. It's not really a tax increase.
Commissioner Waters.
Brian, will this satisfy, by them moving out of DSS, will this satisfy the needs that they have for some additional space?
In the immediate term, yes, sir.
You're saying not for 5 years, but...
Well, Mellie's back there. She's grinning. As you are aware, this would handle their immediate needs. DSS is a program that is constantly expanding and constantly being worked harder and harder based on state guidelines. So for the short term, yes, we think this would handle us for a while.
Time to vote. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed? 5-2, motion passes. Brian.
Another 5-2.
Another 5, a different 5-2, thank you. The Washington Harbor District Alliance Memorandum of Understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attached in your agenda, you have a proposed MOU with the Washington Harbor District Alliance in which the county would serve as the conduit for a potential $230,000 grant. This is a grant that WHDA is applying for under the North Carolina Agricultural Development and Farmland Preservation Trust Fund. The WHDA would use those funds if they were received to install an HVAC system, sprinkler system, and an incubator kitchen in the Harbor District market. The reason they are coming to the county and asking that you partner with them on this is that the grant requires that it either be that it flow through either a nonprofit conservation organization or a county agency. So they are essentially asking, and you've got the MOU, they'd like for you to serve as the conduit for that grant. They will manage the grant. They will work with our finance office in the reporting requirements and making sure that it's right if it's awarded, but that is their request.
And a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, this is going to cost us any money?
No.
None whatsoever? Very well.
It would cost us just a little bit of time, I think, with our finance.
Okay.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, 7-0, motion passes. Brian, you want to talk about animal service records?
Yes, sir. In your agenda, you have copies. Let me back up. You've got copies of a bill, Session Law 2018-105, which made personally identifiable information confidential in Guilford County only as it related to information for people who either adopt animals or people who surrender animals. Session Law 2019-106 included Pitt County and Burke counties in that to make that information confidential. Our animal control officers have run into an issue in the past year where we have had, and specifically I think I sent that to you last month, where specifically one of the most egregious cases was we had an older gentleman who, because of his health and his age, was unable to care for his animal. He did the right thing and brought that animal to the shelter and said, I can't look after this animal anymore because of his health condition. The information about his name and that he turned that animal in is public information currently. And that information was gathered by an outside group, and they essentially went on social media and talked ugly about him. That's just not right. And our goal is, the guy could have dumped his dog on the side of the road. He tried to do the right thing. He shouldn't be punished for that. And unfortunately, in the current environment we are in, there seems to be a lot of conversation and talking, especially on social media, about folks. We need to make it such that people are comfortable in adopting animals, so that, we've had instances where people adopted an animal because somebody turned their animal in, and then they came back and found out who the person was that adopted the animal, went to their house and harassed them because they wanted their animal back. That's not appropriate. Now, under this bill, we would simply be adding our county name to that. I had a brief conversation with Representative Kidwell at the last meeting and asked him about it. He said he'd be glad to because it would take a local bill to do that. Of course, that would have to come from your approval to move that forward. But this simply makes information regarding people who surrender animals or people who adopt animals, that information, that personally identifiable information, becomes confidential. Now, if we move an animal to a rescue organization, that information is still public information. They would know that that animal went to XYZ Rescue. But the individual information would not be public information anymore. So
make a motion to
we would recommend your approval.
Recommendation of the manager.
Second.
Discussion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
This format is somewhat like the way humans are dealt with, adopting a child. Am I right? We're keeping it confidential. Nobody knows.
It depends on whether it's an open or closed adoption.
Yeah. Well, this would be a closed adoption, I reckon,
But
for the county animals.
Let's go on and take care of this dog thing.
Some people consider animals, pets, to be just as important as children, probably more so.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, that will be 7-0. Katie, I guess we'll use Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is an appointment to the Middies Commission. The commissioner is needed to serve as a representative on the Middies Commission Board for a term of 2 years. You have that certificate on page 268, and what we were asking for is a recommendation or appointing a commissioner to that board for a 2-year term.
Commissioner Booth currently serves, so I would say allow him to continue to serve.
I'll second that. I'm assuming that was a motion, is what you were.
Okay. Discussion?
Can we talk about Booth for a while?
Yeah. Come on.
Talk about my altar.
Obviously, I wasn't needed.
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, 7-0. Jail Committee appointments. Commissioner Frankie Waters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The county manager and I were invited over to the sheriff's office to discuss their appointment to the committee, and the sheriff chose not to have representation on the committee. So tonight we need to appoint a total of 3. Our original discussion is that we were going to have 1 from the north side, 1 from the south side, outside the city limits of Washington. We had a total of 2, 4, 5, a total of 9 people that said they would like to participate. And I'm assuming, and I'm going to start with the first recommendation, and then we'll go until we get 4 votes, and we get 3 people. Is that okay?
Yeah. That's fine.
The first one that I'm going to recommend is Charles Slade from Belhaven. I'll make that a motion.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, 7-0. Thank you. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion for Barbara Gaskin. She lives out River Road.
All those in favor for Barbara, raise your right hand. All those opposed, 7-0.
You know, you've got a guy here who's eminently well qualified. We've got 2 or 3. We've got William Ray Leary, and we've got a William Davis. But, you know, I would nominate Ray Leary.
All those in favor of Ray Lilly, raise your right hand. Leary. All those opposed, 7-0. We've got our 3.
Just in case, why don't we have an alternate?
Okay.
We'll do 1 more as an alternate.
Okay, go ahead, John.
I make motion Bill Davis serve as the
Got
alternate.
a second? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, 7-0. Motion passed. We got our 4. Let's see here, where we at? Okay. Chairman Waters, you want to talk about 811?
As our citizens realize, we have more and more fiber in Beaufort County, and this resolution is based on calling North Carolina 811 at least 3 days in advance to let them know that you're going to do some digging. I don't know whether the public is aware of this or not, but if you cut the fiber, you can rest assured that you're going to have to pay for it. It's not like cutting a piece of copper. I know that we have 350 miles of fiber in this county because I used to be on Tri-County Telephones Board. It's not just the cost of being $10,000, and I'm just using that as an example because sometimes you have to go, you know, a good distance both ways in order to be able to patch that. But in today's world, it's the time that you're down. And I would say the minimum in most cases is going to be at least 2 hours. So that means nobody, you know, that depends on their computer is going to be able to work during that 2-hour period. So I'm going to recommend the resolution. It's in your package. I'm not going to bore you. I'm not going to bore you by reading it. So I'll move that we pass that resolution.
Second.
We have a second. Discussion. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All those opposed, 7-0. Motion passes. Commissioner Richardson.
Okay, this is a request to discuss legislation. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. This is a resolution requesting legislation criminalizing the delivery of drug-dependent infants. Several years ago, it came up in the legislature, and it failed. But Social Services has reported to us that we have, and I think she's here, tell me if I'm wrong, 60-something odd drug-dependent babies born drug-dependent in Beaufort County. 58. And this gets to be a really big deal because in talking to Social Services, sometimes it can take years to get these children to the point of anywhere near normalcy. And of course, when they're born drug dependent, there's a problem in getting them into foster homes, and there's just a whole world of expense that goes with this. Mothers who deliver drug-dependent children are criminals. They should go to prison. And that's what we need to do, and I'd like to ask this board to consider tonight asking our representative to introduce legislation to criminalize the birthing of drug-dependent children.
Second. Any more discussion?
Second.
Go ahead.
Well, the concept Mr. Richardson got is very well. But I feel the same way about criminalizing mothers on drugs as I do criminalizing people with cancer. It's a sickness. These people are sick. They use these drugs. And that's the way I feel about it. And I just can't support criminalizing sick people, Mr. Richardson.
Any more discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to say one thing in defense of this motion. Drugs are evil.
I agree with that.
They are evil, and the more and more, and I agree, it is a sickness as well. However, society cannot take the burden of all the evil in the world on its back without there being some ramifications for those that become involved in these evil ways. I'm not saying the people that do the drugs are evil, but they are participating in an evil activity, and they're being used, and that's sad. But still, there needs to be some ramifications, whether the criminalization is harsh or it's lenient, which I would suggest it would be lenient in this case. It still needs to be some ramifications for bringing a poor child into this world that's addicted to drugs. That's awful.
Hang on.
The only thing worse is abortion. Thank you.
Commissioner Langdon.
I agree with Commissioner Booth. When people become addicted, that is a real problem in their lives. And I would rather look at this from a proactive approach, and that is mothers who are addicted while they're pregnant, find some way to get them into some type of treatment facility until they deliver those babies. And then if they choose to continue to do what they're doing, that's a different story. But I just can't see putting them in jail. But I would really hope and pray that we could find a system where, and I don't know if we could actually do that, is to get them into treatment and keep them in treatment for 9 months till those babies are born, and then turn them loose. But I know that may be wishful thinking, but I'd rather do something before rather than after.
Mr. Chairman.
Hang on. Commissioner Richardson.
Thank you. Well, there's two schools of thought, and that's what's coming out here on this business with drugs. Stan Etheridge is right. Drugs are evil. Nobody held those women down and poured drugs down their throat. They were volunteered to take the drugs, knowing that they were going to deliver a baby that was going to be dependent on drugs. Now, it's no different than someone with AIDS going out and deliberately infecting somebody else, knowing what they are doing. It's criminal. They should be punished for it. And that's part of our problem with drugs is the liberal side says, oh, these poor people, we need to feel sorry for them. I can tell you something. Drugs have impacted my family enough to I don't mind sending a drug dealer to jail for the rest of his life. They destroy families. They destroy people. They destroy lives. And to bring a human being into a birth on the face of this earth, knowing that how defective they're going to be in society is criminal. And we need to do something strong about it. Pat them on the head and say, oh, you poor thing, that is not going to get the job done with drugs. It never has, and that's what's got us to where we are infested with drugs now. And drugs are taking down society.
Commissioner Booth.
Mr. Richards, I was hoping that you wouldn't politicize this thing when you said the liberals. Some of us have compassion. I could probably feel the same way about you, that you do drug dealers, but it wouldn't be right because I feel that way. But what I said, and I'm going to say it again, I mean it. These people are actually sick. And then you turn around, we sat back around, if that was the bill, what would we do with 58 mothers in Beaufort County? What would we do with them? The jail won't hold them because we sending them all over the world now.
Send them to jail, you're forcing them to take the treatment. That's what you're doing. If you want to be compassionate, put them in a place that they can't use drugs.
Go ahead, Sam.
Speaking of compassion, would you, Hood, be amenable to amending your resolution to incorporate some of what Commissioner Langley said? Because I agree with part of that. If society would provide a mandatory incarceration in a facility which would get them off drugs, would that be something you'd be interested in? And then if they do not get off the drugs, they can go to jail for a period of time when they get out.
No, because we've already got 10,000 programs to take care of people that are addicted. Why do we need another one? Criminalize them, force them to go straight, and you've taken care of the problem. The whole problem is we're too mamby-pamby with this thing.
I can go either way.
This is my last thing. Well, one of the things you got to realize is that some of these mothers who are addicted to drugs, they were addicted to drugs prior to becoming pregnant. They had no control of their lives prior to getting pregnant, and certainly pregnancy is not going to change their mind. So that's why I say you got to have some compassion. That's the bottom line.
Commissioner Ripholz.
This clearly is a much more difficult situation than is being portrayed. It's not one or the other. And I think that to come out with just a solution like this without having the information, the data, and all the studies that we have to tell us, to help us arrive at that decisions is reckless. And I wouldn't support it.
Time to vote.
Every meeting that I've been to the last 5 years, when we talk about the jail population, you hear anywhere from 40 to 60% of the people that's in the county jail have real problems. And, you know, it sounds good. It sounds like you're going to put them in there and you're going to really change the whole world. But I can tell you, you don't change them in the jail. We got people, if you get outside the county and then you get into the state prison system, we're bringing drugs in because the employers are not paid enough, so that's the way they make some of their money is bringing drugs in. We don't at the state level or even at the federal level, we're not providing the facilities to try to turn any of these people around. So the only place you can put them is in the county jail, and then they get, after they're convicted, they might go to state prison someplace. So, you know, you can call it whatever you want to, but it gets really down to the lack of funding. And you're not going to convert them in the jail. You got to have a facility to put them in.
Sam, real short.
Yeah. The upside from putting them in jail for a short period of time before the baby is born, you would get them off drugs, and then the baby would have a lessened effect of the narcotic in their system. That's something to think about when you take this vote.
Time to vote. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? 5-2, it failed.
Thank you. From the manager, the status. Oh, I skipped one. Oh, the jail. The jail door repair status report.
Good evening, Commissioners. Based upon material delivery dates, Montgomery Technology is planning to mobilize the first week of April. The first few weeks will consist of running overhead conduit for the control system as well as the demolition of the existing slider doors and overhead devices. The installation of the hollow metal frames and door hardware will begin the latter part of April. The delivery of the sliding devices is expected by the third week of May, with substantial completion expected the middle to late June. Beaufort County maintenance staff, Beaufort County Sheriff's Office staff, as well as MTS staff are working together to incorporate multiple maintenance projects into the overall project schedule.
Answer all my questions.
Thank you.
Commissioner Richardson, flood maps.
Now we get to the flood maps. Report from the manager on the status of the new flood maps. We're still looking at June the 19th?
Yes, sir. Actually, we have to do it by June the 19th. That is the date that they become effective. We have to have that adopted by then. Where we currently are with that, you've seen the revised flood maps. You've seen the ordinance that's been sent to the state. They've said, yes, it's compliant. Where we currently are is on the notification. It is actually a legal issue right now that we're looking at to ensure that we are legally doing it correctly. We want to make sure we touch all the bases. Initially, the Department of Public Safety sent us a note when they did their training was that the notification had to be under a certain statute and under land use. Essentially, as you were changing like a land use program, you would have to do it under that statute, which would require us, if it were affecting more than 50 people, you could either send a first-class mail to everybody it affects, or if it affects more than 50 people, you can run a half-page ad in the newspaper and then send a notice to everybody who owns property in the county but doesn't reside in the county. So we were starting that process. Recently, we've had another conversation with DPS, and they said that you don't have to do it that way, that you can simply do it as a public notice because it is not they don't view it as a land use issue. They say it is a program that is set up by the federal government under FEMA, and if you don't adopt these, you don't get in the program. So it's not a land use issue. So the county attorney's reviewing that. I've had conversations with a couple of our neighboring counties, their planners, to see what they're doing, and everybody has told me what they're doing is the simple one public notice, just like we normally do public notices. But we want to make sure that we are legally correct on that, because what we don't want is somebody to come back and say you didn't do it right. So,
well, what you're talking about, one notice, is the way that we've always done it every time that this thing's been revised.
You have to adopt the new ordinance, and it has to be in place before June 19th of 2020.
Commissioner Richardson.
Okay, within the sheriff's department, the sheriff found some money. Actually, he had some surplus money that he didn't spend because he couldn't hire enough people and lap salaries and all that kind of stuff. Decided that he wanted to give about half of the department some really big salary increases. And what I want to know is, have those salary increases been put into effect?
Yes, sir, they were.
This was without a vote of this board.
That's correct. There was notice made to this board. There was notice made to this board a week before the last board meeting that this was a change that was within policy. And we held off on those changes until the Tuesday after the last board meeting, and there was no objection from the board, no action taken by the board, so we moved those forward.
Well, there was action taken by the board because you were instructed at the last meeting that we haven't talking about this subject to tell the sheriff that you didn't have an answer from the board. And that's recorded. So I'm upset that we're given annually about $350,000 of increases, and that the sheriff's taking it upon himself to do this without the authority of this board. We have never did this way before. We've got a serious problem with this sheriff. And we've got a serious problem with operations between this board and you, because you were told that you did not have an answer to give to the sheriff. And you went ahead with this anyway.
You're exactly right, Commissioner Richard, because it was within policy. And on February the 3rd, you were one of the board members that received the email from me that specifically said, these items are going to occur. It is within policy. And you had a week to tell me, I don't like that, I don't want that. We would have pulled it, we would have done whatever. So, you know, don't blame me for something that we put in front of the board and y'all chose not to take action on it.
Well, let me put you on notice for something. If this kind of a trick ever happens again, I'll be making a notice for your resignation.
I hear that very clearly, Commissioner Richardson, and you are one of 7. And what I'm saying to you is that this item was sent to you. So, you know, if you want to play games with that, that's fine. But I didn't do anything wrong. This board was notified of it. This board chose not to take action. So if you want to blame me for that, that's fine. Go ahead. But it was within policy, and it was done. The statutes allow that to occur. The personnel policy allows that to occur. If the board wanted to have stopped it, I explained to you guys very clearly at the planning session that y'all are ultimately in control of this. Ultimately in control of it. So you have the option to take care of that. You chose not to.
Well, let me tell you, I'm going to say it one more time. If a trick like this ever happens again, where I'm sending an email based on my not doing anything for something that happened when you've already been given notice that you didn't have an answer, I will be making a motion for your resignation. You need to understand this is a serious event. And for the taxpayers to know what has happened here, we have increased expenses using budget money by $350,000 a year in the sheriff's department, with the sheriff taking it upon himself, saying, just as we said earlier, with the newfound tax money that we could take out and spend however we wanted to, I have newfound money. I can do whatever I want to with it. County government and no business runs this way. This is wrong.
You ready to move on with Brenda Hamilton's?
No, sir. I need to address this because there's some factual things that are incorrect. The total amount was $174,660, so it's not $300,000. We anticipated benefits of 0.25%, so the total is $218,325. Those were funds that were in the sheriff's office budget, and of that, that's an annual amount. So the sheriff has said that he is going to make that a neutral item in his budget. He is going to find those cuts next year in his budget. And in the planning session, actually, Commissioner Richardson, I think you said that you didn't have a problem with implementing the pay study as long as those cuts were found. The sheriff did that. The sheriff said, I'll find those cuts in my budget. That's exactly what he's doing. So, you know, I'm sorry that you don't have control over the sheriff in those matters, but, you know, and you can blame me all you want, but that's just a...
I'm sorry, but I disagree wholeheartedly with what you said, because I never gave approval to do this. I was trying to slow this thing down all the way, and I do have control over the sheriff's budget, and I do have control, this board does. I'm 1/7, as you say, of how he spends the money. And we budgeted those positions at certain pay rates, was the way that budget was made up, and he does not have the authority to change that, and you don't have the authority to change that grossly the way it was done without the approval of this board. And don't you multiply that number times 2, because we're talking about 6 months of the year? Then he found $100-and-something thousand instead of $200-and-something thousand. Once again, we're back to talking about accounting practice.
Okay, Brenda Hamilton, update.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I would like to read for you something very clearly from the School of Government, from Kara Malanzi, who's an attorney that deals with personnel matters. I asked her the question specifically, can the sheriff unilaterally move his personnel into new classifications or grades as long as there's an existing class? And she said no, but it is up to the sheriff to determine the scope of work of each sheriff's office employee. The sheriff may change the scope of work of the employee such that it results in a new classification as long as there is sufficient money in the sheriff's budget to cover the difference in salary. These changes were within policy, and the board was notified. Thank you.
Well, I disagree wholeheartedly with the budget that we're getting ready to do. This 3-page so-called budget ordinance that we do, which means any government official can go out and do anything he wants to, is a joke. And I've complained about it over and over and over again. And we need to look at this sheriff budget this time, and we need to tighten it down to the point that this board is in control of spending, because you got $2 million in the jail that he unilaterally, with members of this board not doing the right thing, went out and messed up those sales that could have been repaired. This could have been done a whole lot different way of saving us money. It hasn't been done. We've got serious problems in this county.
Okay, you ready to move on to Brenda Hamilton, or you want to?
Well, that's another, yes, I am ready to move on to Brenda Hamilton. This again involves the sheriff. You know, the sheriff's not here tonight. The sheriff hasn't been to the last 2 meetings. The sheriff is not cooperating with the county commissioners. The sheriff sent word that he wanted to be on the agenda tonight for the county commissioners. And then just before the meeting starts, the sheriff sends word that he's not going to be here. Now, does this sound like somebody that's level? I don't think so. The Brenda Hamilton case is a terrible case from the standpoint of citizens in Beaufort County, because this woman lost her life to we don't know what. And it was investigated, and that investigation, from what I can see, because there's been no action from the Sheriff's Department now for 3 or 4 months, all we get is a runaround, and I'm chairman of the committee. Every time this comes up, that number one, wouldn't you think that if you were a sheriff and you went to a scene and there was blood at the scene that you needed to secure the scene? We know the sheriff did not secure that scene. Half the county walked through it. Right away, the investigation was botched. The second big deal thing that happened was the sheriff gave the evidence to the Wildlife Service. Why? Because they have red wolves, and they wanted to make sure their red wolves weren't blamed for this. And then they brought the information back to the sheriff after they had decided that their wolves didn't do it. Well, you know, did they bring all the information back? I doubt it very seriously. This whole thing has implications of incompetence on the part of the Sheriff's Department and incompetence in the handling of evidence, and been trying to get answers now for 6 months from the laboratory on this, and the sheriff will not give the information. We've got serious problem with this whole thing. I feel for this family. This shouldn't happen. We should be competent in what we're doing and serving the public, and the sheriff's office is not doing that. So that's my charge to the sheriff tonight, is bring us the evidence, bring us the information, and let's get on with this thing and stop covering up and dragging your feet, because that's exactly what's going on.
Back to contaminating the scene, I went to one of your meetings where you brought in a FBI expert, and he said these guys did a hell of a job. The Sheriff's Department, the rescue guys, priority number one, try to save this lady's life. He did not, your expert had no problem with it. I was at your meeting.
He was talking about saving the woman's life. He was not talking about after her body was removed and she left there, half the county still walked through the crime scene, or whatever scene it wasn't really a crime scene, but through the scene. The investigation was botched, so you can make all those accusations you want to. Why is the sheriff withholding information? Why has this been going on for over a year without any answers? Sounds to me like Washington, D.C. has moved to Washington, N.C.
Commissioner Waters.
Yeah, I think we need to make sure that the people that are watching the TV in the future and just heard those comments understand exactly what happened that morning. I live in the neighborhood, and I've had a chance to talk to a lot of people. Our local volunteer fire department's made up of volunteers. When they showed up on the scene, the word that they got was that they had been bitten, that Brenda had been bitten by 2 dogs. Now, they had been bitten by 2 dogs. It was not a crime scene at the time. Then, it changed. In about 2 hours, it changed to where they did not know who attacked Miss Hamilton. And at that point in time, the Wildlife Commission was called, and they sent people in, and it was treated as if she had been attacked by a bear. So for the first 48 hours, it was handled by the Wildlife Commission before all that evidence was passed back. It is a very tragic thing, but in a rural area where we live, the volunteers did the best job that they could do at the time. And nobody considered it a crime scene until, 12 hours, 48 hours later, when people were trying to second guess. And I can tell you, everybody's got their opinion and everybody's still trying to second guess. But the evidence is at a place right now that may be able to confirm what happened if we just give them a little bit more time to confirm what it was. They're the country's best. They have bone fragments that nobody's been able to tell where those bone fragments came from. But there are some people that have their own idea where they came from. So I think we still have to be very patient. If you watch some of the problem is we watch these TV programs and we thinking that every crime can be figured out in about 50 minutes. And we're just one of, I don't know how many. This lab has stuff backed up. And we just have to be very patient. That's not something that the sheriff has something to do. Now, we can bypass them and tell them to send the material back and send it to the University of Florida. That's an option. And so if you would like to instruct the sheriff to do that, then we can do that. We can just go ahead and get that and just say that we've given up on them. But they're very professional. I'd like to see us leave it with them until they confirm one way or the other before we send it to the University of Florida.
Here's what I would like to do. I would like to get the name and phone number. You probably got it in some invoices. We paid some bills. I would like to get that information so I can call the laboratory myself. Because usually I get a different answer than what a lot of other people are giving me when I make the call. So I want that information so I can make the call.
Yeah, that's what happened on the jail stuff. You called two companies that were going to do the repair work, and they said, no, we don't want any part of it.
I called the company that was supposed to be making repairs. It was supposed to have been called, and they said they had never been called. Let's stop going over this. All you try to do is smear this into something that it's not. I'm the only commissioner that spent about 8 hours working on this when we first found out that the jail had been shut down, me trying to get it fixed and trying to find out what was going on. What did you do, Frankie? You went over and hugged the sheriff.
And that's a bald-faced lie. You know I didn't go over there and hug the sheriff. You got that on tape? I mean, you got, your office is right close by, so I'm assuming you got it on tape. If you got it on tape, pull it out. Pull it out. Otherwise, it's a bald-faced lie.
Frankie, if you don't understand these kind of comparisons, if your intellect doesn't do that, then I apologize for abusing your simple mind.
Well, I would say this much. You were not born in Beaufort County, so I understand you're not as smart as I am.
Jail population, Mr. Richardson.
Mr. Chairman.
If you may.
Mr. Chairman. I did receive an email this afternoon from Chief Deputy Rose regarding the microtrace information. I'd be glad to share that with the board. I don't necessarily want to read it all simply because of some of the things they talk about. But this is the email thread going back that Chief Rose sent to me. Just a couple things. January 12th of this year, the medical records were sent to them. February 27th said they were making good progress. They found some additional fibers, recovered numerous hairs from the clothing, continuing their analysis, potential bone fragments, things like that. And then again today there was an update. So I'll be glad to give this information to the board that Chief Deputy Rose sent us. And it does have the name of the senior research microscopist and laboratory manager who's handling the project for microtrace.
Okay, jail population and staffing report.
Well, the whole purpose of this was for the sheriff to be here. The sheriff never comes himself. He always sends his mouthpiece, and but he's not here. So my question was, with the jail operating at about less than 2/3, maybe 60% of capacity for the last year, what adjustments have been made to staffing in the jail, if any? And I can't get an answer to that. So, I know that some of the people in the jail are working full time, particularly, I'm not going to name the person because it's an individual job, but I know they've been working just as many hours as they were working before, and they got 2/3 of the people to take care of. So, what's being done from a management standpoint to save the county money on this particular situation? But I can't ask that because the sheriff refuses to show up. He refused to show up at budget meetings. He refused to show up at this meeting. So, and he's setting his own payroll rules. So you're beginning to see what's going on with the sheriff.
Brian Elliott, you ready for the public?
Yeah, actually, I have one item that Chief Deputy Rose sent me as well on this. It said there's nothing new to report on the jail population and adjustments to staffing as that have not already been reported. So that was his email this afternoon at 4 o'clock.
Well, he's never reported anything about the level of staffing, so I guess that's a true statement.
Thank you, Brian.
In our jail committee meeting the other morning, Seth Edwards said that we had deputies leaving as early as 3 o'clock in the morning to bring them back for trial. So I think where our overtime is coming from, and a lot of our resources are going right now, is moving prisoners in for court sessions.
Brian, you want to review the public comment policy?
Yes, sir, be glad to. In your agenda, you have an item, public comment policy, and you'll see included in this, at the February 10th, 2020 regular board meeting, you asked, Commissioner Richard and Commissioner Deatherage asked that the public policy come back for discussion at the next meeting. In your packet, you'll see a copy of the December 7th, 2015 agenda item and the minutes from that, where the public comment policy was unanimously adopted by the board after making 2 changes to the draft policy. Those 2 changes to the draft policy, you'll see in my notes says 7-0 with deltas. That was taking out the topic, which was the number 2. You'll see on page 281 where it's highlighted and it's written through on and topic. That was a request that Commissioner Richardson asked that be taken off so that people didn't have to say what topic they were talking about. And then the last piece was the very end where it said, at the request of members of the board, the county manager, county attorney, or other appropriate staff members present may respond to a issue raised by a speaker during the public comment period after the speaker is finished. The board asked that be stricken as well. So those 2 items were stricken from the policy on December the 7th, 2015, before it was unanimously adopted. I've also included in the agenda for you several documents from the UNC School of Government that talk about public comment periods, what they are, open meetings, public's right to speak, criticizing public employees, when board members don't talk back, and comment periods, what's legal. Those are written mostly by Freda Bluestein, one by Fleming Bell, and happy to have any conversations with you about those. The only thing that I would say to you on this is the policy appears to me to be fairly good. There was a post that was made by Ms. Bluestein on February 15th of 2016, which was the year several months after you adopted your policy in December of 15, that did say, and I'll bring that attention to you on page 296, where we have in there limiting comments about closed session matters. Her legal interpretation on that was there's probably not any grounds to do that, but it says it does make sense to include a statement that members of the public should not discuss confidential information in the public comment period. And you do have that in yours. So if there was just from a brief reading, my suggestion to you on that would be to remove the second item under the limitations of speakers, and that is matters that are closed session matters. So if you eliminated that and you left in matters that are made confidential by law, I think that's essentially the only change that was in here relating to the documents and the articles that have been written by the folks at the School of Government about it. There was some discussion, and there was just some discussion in December of 15 when you had this topic about people coming in and essentially using the public comment period to campaign for office. And there was some pretty strong discussion about the board on that. So I know that came up last meeting, but be glad to find any additional information the board would like on this, or leave it to you to have your discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Richards.
Yeah, I read every word that the manager presented in this, and since I was one of the people that was complaining and had it brought up, I agree with everything that's in here. I mean, I read all of it. It is the way that I remembered it, and that is you can't limit free speech. If someone wants to come in and in a diplomatic way complain about a commissioner, they can do it. If they want to complain about an employee, they can do it. They can't do personal attacks, which is what was going on when we put this policy in. So I don't have a bit of problem with the policy, and I don't mind. I'll make the motion to remove the closed session part that the manager has recommended. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. It's exactly the way I remembered it. So I move that we remove the item having to do with a prohibition of discussing closed session items.
Second.
Discussion? Any discussion?
Yes.
Hold on. Did you?
I just wanted to make, what item number was that in our
If you go to page
Second page?
282, it's the very top
I
bullet
got you.
point.
I got it.
Matters which are closed session matters.
Thank you.
Stan?
Yeah, I wasn't a commissioner when you guys passed this back in 2015. I really think there's some tinkering needs to be done to it. I mean, we had our representative in here at the last meeting, and we couldn't speak to him. We couldn't ask him questions. I mean...
Politics, didn't you hear what
well,
they say?
He is our elected official, and there are some issues that we got him here in front of us. It would be nice to speak to him.
I got his card. Here it is.
No, well, this is a public meeting, and he spoke publicly, and I think if we wanted to publicly ask him questions, it would be apropos. I just think these are some things we should be able to tinker with.
Brian?
To address Commissioner Dethridge on that, because Representative Kidwell spoke under public comments, I think that's where the restrictions applied. If he had been put on the agenda as a presentation or as a speaker, then of course you could have that interaction all you wanted to under your rules.
Mr. Chairman,
Hang on, Commissioner. Go ahead, Frank.
I was just going to say, let's extend him an invitation to come back and appear during items of discussion, Stan. That way we can have some dialogue back and forth.
If I understood my reading of these things correctly, if the board decides that someone up here is speaking publicly, if we want to talk to them or ask them questions, as long as the board's in agreement, we can do it. I mean, there's no prohibition against it. The prohibition is that we are not going to have a dialogue with anybody unless we want to.
Mr. Chairman.
Your motion is good, Mr. Richardson.
Yeah, but I remember the last meeting, though, there was a majority, at least a consensus, that we not speak to the representative.
Well, that was the consensus, but the consensus could have gone the other way.
But generally it will not, because these rules are cited as such that they are controlling.
Rule number 12 says you could do that.
Commissioner Waters.
The public comments to me is for the citizens of Beaufort County that come in here and talk about particular issues that they have concerns about. When it comes to an elected official in Kidwell's point of view, you know, it's courtesy that he called and asked if he can come, or either we call and we put him there so we can have dialogue. But he shouldn't be in the public comment, but that was the only thing that we could allow him to do because he was not on the agenda. We could have voted to add him to the agenda at the last meeting, and we didn't do that. So, and we could have talked to him. So I think this policy is fine. Well, that's with the one change that we ought to go ahead and approve it and extend an invitation to Kidwell to come back.
Are we ready? Ready to vote? All in favor, the right hand. All opposed, 7-0. We're now down to closed session.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, did that motion include an invitation to Representative Kidwell? Or are you just, in general, you want us to make
just
that?
a policy?
Okay.
I just say the consensus is to issue that invitation.
He's welcome.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So there's the reading into closed session, the motion to go into closed session under NCGS 143-318-11A3 to consult with an attorney employed or retained by the public body in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege between the attorney and the public body, and for discussion of existing litigation. That litigation is Beaufort County v. Amerisource Bergen Drug Company, or Drug Corporation, and Purdue Pharma LP, Chapter 11, Case 19-23649, U.S. Bankruptcy Court, Northern District of Ohio, Eastern Division. Personnel matter will also be discussed under NCGS 143-318-11A6 to consider qualifications, competence, performance, condition, and appointment of a public officer, employee, and prospective public employer.
Before we go, just let the public know, we're going to get up and go to the back room. So you want to welcome to stay here. Have a motion?
So
Second. All right, all those in favor? Huh? Need a motion to come out of closed session?
So moved.
Second the motion.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. 7-0. Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second. All right.